Take it away,
Good
Kim.
after Thanks, Jess. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kim Stemshorn, and I'm the coordinator of the Smart Commute program at the City of Toronto. And it is a great pleasure to be here today as we launch the first of 3 Cycling Commuter Series webinars in part of the LiveGreen at Home workshop series. LiveGreen Toronto delivers programs, grants, incentives, and resources to engage the community in helping to transform TO, as well as accelerating the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions in Toronto. Smart Commute works with Toronto employers to make it easier for their employees to commute sustainably to and from work. Commuting sustainably helps reduce traffic and improves the environment by reducing emissions and improving air quality. It's been an impressive few years in sustainable travel in Toronto. Through active TO, we've seen quiet streets, major street closures to cars on Lakeshore, Bayview, and Black Creek Drive, just to name a few. And over 25 kilometers of additional bike lanes have been installed throughout Toronto, as well as the installation of priority bus and bike lanes through Rapid TO in Scarborough. Before we begin, I would like to start with a land acknowledgement to honor and respect the land we use for our public transit, the tires of our bikes and vehicles, and the soles of our feet. We acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started today. We'll be recording this workshop. In order to optimize your viewing experience of the demo, please refer to the slide on the screen here. We recommend that you click the layout button on the right, as indicated by the green arrow, select grid, and then select hide participant with video off, as indicated by the yellow stars. We'll be taking questions throughout the bike repair demo, so please enter your questions in the Q&A section on your screen. Any questions we don't get to, we'll try to answer after the demo is completed. And something a bit different for today's webinar. Our guest speaker and bike expert, Ed Mark from Gateway Bike Hub, will also be asking you questions throughout the presentation to get a sense of where everyone on this webinar is at with their cycling knowledge and interests. So as Ed asks questions throughout the presentation, please reply in the Q&A function as a question, even if it's not a question. We want to hear from you. So our guest today is Ed Mark. Ed is the manager at the Gateway Bike Hub, which is possible because of a wonderful collaboration between Evergreen, the neighborhood organization, and the City of Toronto's Solid Waste Management Division under the Community Reduce and Reuse program. I'll just take a moment here to say how amazing the Community Reduce and Reuse program is. I highly recommend looking it up on the City of Toronto's website. It's not just about bikes. We have 3 bike repair hubs through this program. We have sewing repair hubs and various other amazing initiatives in Toronto that work to divert waste from landfill and work towards a circular economy. So do check out the Community Reduce and Reuse program through the Solid Waste Division at the City of Toronto. So Ed and Gateway Bike Hubs are fierce advocates for safer cycling infrastructure in the Flemington and Thorncliffe neighborhoods. Gateway Bike Hub is a space for the community to celebrate the bicycle through repair, learning opportunities, and even bike giveaways, free of charge to the community. Ed works on program development, including bike repair and refurbishment, cycling safety, and cycling skills. Ed is an avid cyclist and has over 25 years of experience as a bike mechanic. If you haven't been there already, Gateway Bike Hub is located at 10 Gateway Boulevard, which is located at Don Mills Road, just south of Eglinton Avenue East. And it is my great pleasure to introduce Ed Mark of Gateway Bike Hub to share some knowledge on home repairs to get your bike commute ready. Take it away, Ed.
Thank you, Kim. That was a very kind introduction. Welcome, everyone. Very excited to be here. Behind me, here I am at the shop at Gateway Bike Hub. You can see the logo painted on the wall. We're located in Flemington Park on Gateway Boulevard. So pay us a visit. Like Kim said, we are a city-funded program by the Solid Waste Management Division under the Community Reduce and Reuse program. And all of our services are free. And right now, our main program is a uh, free bike repair. So you call us and make an appointment. You can drop off your bike. Us staff and volunteers who can help repair your bike, and then we would advise you how to maintain your bike and come pick it up. We also have bike giveaways, and we also do earn a bikes. Earn a bikes are an opportunity for residents of Toronto to come and enroll and learn a bit more about bike mechanics, some cycling skills, go on a little group ride, and also get to keep a bike that you may not already have. So we would assign a bike for you. So those are examples of some of the programs that we're doing. And obviously webinars like this, where we get to offer some advice, some webinars on all different types of topics. Today, we're going to do, I guess, home repairs for commuters. Now, my first question to everyone is, how many of you have not commuted by bike and wish to start to try? And I'm going to, this presentation is for people who haven't or who occasionally commute by bike and they want to learn more. If any of you are hardcore commuters, which go every day to work or to the store, on the bike all the time, this may be a little review. Maybe you'll learn something. Okay, let's get into this. First thing about commuting, since I'm an avid commuter, I've commuted to school and work for over 35 years. And behind me is a bike. I guess this is called a classic commuter bike. I thought the green color would be nice for the camera. And it has all the classic things that a commuter would want on their daily bike ride. So that means big wheels. We call them 700C wheels, wider tires for any bumpy roads or rough terrain. We have gears. Most bikes have gears. Most of us have bikes with gears. It depends on how many speeds. This one has a basket, which is very cute. Also has fenders. One of the most important things about commuting is that you never know what weather you're gonna come into, whether it's throughout the day or in the morning. Yeah. So fenders are super important. And here I'm pointing at the rear one, this white thing that has a cover. This is actually called a skirt guard. So if any of you have never seen one before, it was designed for people who wear skirts so that, any material, long coats or anything, long shirts don't get caught in the wheel. That's why it has this massive cover looking, but it acts as a fender too. In terms of preparing to commute, so it's super important to be prepared. And how do you prepare for biking to work, whether it's once a week or every day, or doesn't matter what season? You first have to have the right tools. So I'm gonna point my camera down here. Oh, sorry. I'm gonna actually bring up some tools to show you. These are the basic tools that every person that wants to do some maintenance themselves would have. Let's see. So first we have Allen keys. Most bikes are 90% use of Allen keys, and it's for any kind of derailleur adjustments. You'll see the hexagonal shape bolts on all the bikes, and if you were to buy a set of these from any hardware store in metric sizing, So they're all millimeters. It will fit your bike. What's next? You will need wrenches. This is a very fancy one, and it's got all the sizes ranging from 7 millimeter to 19. Again, it's all metric, and you can get these sets at any hardware store. These were from Canadian Tire. This should fit every nut on the bike that you have. And what else would you have? Screwdrivers. My headset's falling off. So these are the two main screwdrivers that you would need. One has, some people may call a cross, but we call it a Phillips screwdriver. It's got a plus shape on the bolt head. And then you have the slot screwdriver, which is a flat, which is also very handy for cleaning. What else do we have? We have a brush kit. This is a fancy brush kit. It's a bag of brushes with all different thicknesses and everything, but really, you really just need like an old dish sponge. That's all you really need. You don't have to buy these fancy kits, but if you happen to have brushes, old toothbrushes will work. I use them a lot, or any other size like hairbrush or anything like that. This is a very bike specific brush. I'm going to show you, and this is probably one of the most versatile brushes. This is called a gear brush, and this is very important for the drivetrain. I'm going to talk about cleaning in a second, and it actually has stiffer bristles to get at the really dirty spots here, and also has this jagged end that you can get inside the gears, because when you're commuting a lot of grime and dirt accumulate, and it's hard to get in between the gears and so forth. What else would you need? You would need a pump. Now here we have a pump. This is a floor pump, which has a gauge. They come in different valve configurations. Yeah, we would need something to actually fix a flat tire with. These are called tire levers. Buy them in sets from Canadian Tire or anywhere that sells bikes. And also a patch kit. Oh, okay. So, what would you need to do before you start commuting? Okay, well, you can do this prior to commuting, but the things I'm going to describe to you are things that you can do every time before, that you should do every time before you go out on your bike ride. And before I do that, one of the most important things about commuting, and something that we've come across in the shop when people bring in repairs, is the important thing of actually keeping your bike clean. Obviously, this bike looks clean because it's brand new, but if you've ridden your bike once in a while or twice a week or every day, your bike collects dirt a lot. So a lot of times people will bring in their bikes and say, you know, my chain is not working right, or my wheels are making noise and stuff. And most of the time is because they kind of neglected their bike and it got really dirty, and the grime actually started to mask all the problems. So it's super important to keep your bike clean. That's why I showed you the brush kit and the gear brush. And that's one of the best things to do when you're preparing your bike for commuting, because if you keep your bike clean, you'll be able to spot the problems a lot sooner. So here's one of the first thing, before I take my bike out to go to work or to go to the store or anything like that, and I do this every time, is I do an ABC check. We did it in another video. We have more detailed videos on our Instagram about what an ABC check is. But ABC are letters that stand for the basic things on the bike. So A means air. So before you go out and actually, it's super important to check your tires for air before you go out, because 90% of the time, and that's our number one repair in here in the shop that people bring in, is they have a flat tire. 90% of the time it's because their tires are underinflated. And how you can tell, this is why I'm going to show you a fancy little gadget here. This is called a air pressure gauge. This is really fancy. You don't need to get one of these, but it's also super important to have a pump with a tire gauge on them so that you know how much air to pump into the tire. And a lot of times the tire will have written on the sidewall. You look here on the sidewall, they have a recommended pressure in PSI, which is pounds per square inch on the tire. This one here says from 40 to 65 PSI. And so, like I said, many people just grab their bikes and go. They just go out there and not even check the air pressure, and then they'll hit a curb or a bump or run over something. And because it's underinflated, it'll pinch. The tube inside the tire will actually pinch and then cause a flat. And a lot of times we try to tell people, please keep your the air inflated to the recommended pressures on your tires. All tires have different air pressures, so make sure that you know where to look to check for the pressures. Also, for commuting, you're gonna have to learn how to remove, excuse me, its wire is caught. Look here. We have checking my camera. We have what we call a quick release. So I'm pointing to this lever here. And what it is it substitutes for normally a bolt, and it fastens the wheel on. How you would remove the quick release is to grab onto the lever, open it, and right here on the lever there's an open, usually a word open and then the close on the other side. So once it's open, actually turn the lever to loosen, because the other side is a lock nut. The wheel will come out. I didn't release the brake, sorry. Like that. Okay, so most of you, or some of you, will have this called a quick release lever. And when you put it back on, you actually make sure that the axle is back in the dropouts of the frame. You would close it, but the key is that you would twist the lock nut on the other side, turn it, and when you press the lever in back closed, you should feel the resistance halfway. Once you feel resistance, you can use force to just press it in, and it's in tight. That's how you remove a wheel. So let's do that again. Great. That's good. Now, so that was the A for air. B is for brakes. So a lot of the bikes that we have different style brakes. So if you have a a road bike where it's got skinny tires and it's like for road racing, like in the Tour de France, they have the caliper brakes, so it looks slightly different than what these brakes are. On this commuter bike, it's a linear pull brake, which is more like a older mountain bike style brake. And then some bikes, the more modern bikes, or if you bought a bike within the last year or two, they could have like a disc brake. Now, adjusting different types of brakes is another webinar. They can get quite complicated. In this case, we have linear pull brakes, and when you do the ABC check, you check for the air, and you squeeze the brakes to make sure that they're touching the proper spot in the rim, and they're activating. Spin the wheel, just spinning. Wheel's not in properly. So you spin the wheel, you squeeze the brake, and it works. It's great. You do it with both wheels. That one. Squeeze, and it works. So what you're looking for is no real noises or rubbing. You want to make sure the wheel is spinning freely. And you also want to check if the brake pads are worn out. And how do you do that? Because usually every brake has a brake pad, and they have little notches on the brake pad, and you can tell if all those notches have been worn out. And if that's the case, then you'll probably have to take it to a bike shop or bring it to us, and we can replace them for you. Now, the one thing that I wanted to show you today, brake pads do wear, and sometimes when brake pads wear, you actually squeeze the brake and it's actually too much pull. So there is a way to adjust that so that if you're used to more of a firm, instant engaging brake where it's a lot of bite, where you just pull it slightly and it feels a lot stronger, you can actually tighten it on your own. Show you that. Just gonna grab a oh. Anyways. So you can tighten the brake with a 5mm Allen key, and you would use the cinch bolt. You can see that there's a cable coming through here, and it's as simple as loosening this bolt. And you would just push in the brake arm, and you tighten the bolt. So a lot of the bikes, they use this theory of the cable pulling. There are brake cables that pull on the lever. Now you have a tighter feeling brake. And it's also the same with the derailleur system or the gear changing system, where they have a shifter at the handlebar, and they have a cable running through the bike attached to the derailleur. In this case, there's no front derailleur. Most of you will have one, but this one has a rear derailleur where it's the same thing. The shifter pulls on the cable, and you would have shifting like so. Okay. If you have problems with shifting where it makes noises and is not shifting correctly, you can call us, or you can. It's all totally different webinar on its own. Okay, so we're over to the C. The C is called chain. Super important to have a properly functioning chain. This is where the cleaning comes in that gear brush I was showing you. You want to keep your chain clean all the time, especially if you ride in poor weather or in the winter. The chain takes a beating, or if you store your bike outside, the chain is made of steel and it's very easy to rust. So you want to keep it clean and you want to keep it lubricated. Usually lubricating with oil is the best. A bike chain or a bike specific oil. I don't recommend WD-40 because it doesn't stay on your chain very long. It's very thin. And I don't recommend olive oil, which we've had people come in and say, well, we put vegetable oil. Well, that doesn't work very well. If you have too much oil, actually, it'll coat the chain. Yes, it looks great, but it'll also attract a lot of dirt and mud and grime, road grime, and then it's very difficult to clean. So when you actually lubricate your chain, want to take the whatever bottle of oil you have, you want to lube it on the bottom side where it's touching. You can actually drop one drop on each chain link. This is a chain link. And then you can use a rag to catch the extra oil, and then you would wipe the excess oil off. So the idea is that you want to lubricate the inside the rollers of each chain, because each part of the chain has a roller and a pin. And that's what you want lubricated. You don't need to lubricate all the metallic plates on the outside. So you would wipe it off, and then you're good to go, and your chain won't make any noise. When it does start making noise, like a creaky or squeaky noise, it means your chain's dry. That means all the lubricant dried up. And if you have an extremely dry chain, it'll affect your shifting. It'll probably annoy you because it's so loud, and if possibly your chain could break. It's not lubricated. Okay. So I'm gonna put it to there's also a drop test. So I'm not going to do it in front of everyone, but the drop test before you go out for your daily commute is where you pick up the bike and you just lift it up for about 6 inches and you just drop it. And then you listen for any odd noises, like rattling noises, any loose bolts, any noises that normally you wouldn't hear. You'll obviously hear a chain hitting the thing, so that's not a concern. But you are listening for any rattling, and that is a quick way of determining. Okay, well, I don't really hear anything, so it's good to go. Okay, I'm actually gonna put some questions out. Are there any specific commuting questions that people want to ask? You can put them in the Q&A. I'll ask Kim. Is anyone asking questions?
So for our attendees, feel free to, I know it's a Q&A function, but if you feel free to use it for comments or questions or things we'd like to elaborate. We received a question from Daphne. What is the difference between wet lube and dry lube, and how do we know which one to use?
Oh, excellent question. I am going to. No, here. I have a solution. I'm going to show you. Sorry. Okay. So here I have a dry lube. Here I have a wet lube. The dry lube is super thin. You probably won't be able to see when I actually put it on the chain. Try putting it on the chain. Let's get to see this. Oh, as you can see, dry lubes are generally more solvent-like. That means it's runny. Then this is a super thick lube called Tenacious Oil. We consider a wet lube. You can see it drips out a lot slower and it's more viscous. So here's the difference. When they say dry lube in dry conditions, they have a lighter lube so that less dirt and sand will stick to it. And in a wet lube, they want a heavier oil so that wet weather, if it rain, will be less likely to wash it off. So if you ride in the winter, in snow, in rain, the wet lube will stay on your chain longer. And the dry lube is wet lube in dry weather will get goopy and dirt will stick to it. That's why they recommend the dry lube. Does that answer your question?
That's so great, Ed. Thank you for. And I noticed, what was that little applicator you used? Was that just the bottle of lube? I think that was the dry lube.
Yeah, that's right. Some of the bottles of bicycle lube that you buy at you can even get these at Canadian Tire now, but any bike shop. They will come with a kind of, the WD-40 cans with the straw. Yeah, a lot of these lubes have this little straw that can stick it in the end. You don't have to use one. It's just a little more precise. You can get it in little small spots. This one's called Tri-Flow, which is a very good all-purpose like dry lube. And we just happen to cut the straw because it's just so we have more bottles of it, so we we kind of share the straw. Anyways,
That's great. I love that you're reusing too. It sounds like, we don't have to dispose of those bottles
yeah, the
once we're
long
done with them.
straw gets caught on things and we lose it, so we just cut them and it's just easier.
Nice. Ed, we received a question from Stephen. Is all bike creaking bad? So those sounds that you mentioned, maybe when we do the drop.
Yeah, no, not all bad. Um, One of the biggest questions we get when people bring in repairs and we try to probe a little more is that people will say, my bike's making a noise and I don't know, right? So we try to probe a little more saying, does it creak when you're pedaling? Does it creak when the bike is just coasting? Is it creaking when you're turning? And that helps us pinpoint certain creaks. There are certain areas where creaking is completely safe. Like sometimes, if I'm pulling on this housing, and black housing is what is the covering for the cable. So inside the housing is just a sheath protection. And sometimes on bikes, a lot of the housing will cross each other or where they attach to the frame. Sometimes it's like metal, and every time you turn, it'll creak. So that kind of creaking is safe. It takes a bit of a experienced ear to kind of, to listen for any kind of creaking that way. If it were when you're pedaling, let's say you were standing up and trying to charge up a hill and you heard this creaking noise, then chances are it is a bearing. So bearings are little balls that make things rotate. So you have bearings inside your bottom bracket, which is where your cranks are. You have bearings in your pedals. you have bearings in your wheels. And if they ever get dirty and contaminated or super dry, the creaking could be a problem. I think if you were to ride with, if you were to hear a creak and it was getting louder every time you ride it, then it's probably a problem because it's probably a surface that is turning and rolling, and you don't want it to get any worse because it'll start, bearings will actually start pitting and causing more damage as it goes. So uh, there are safer creaks like the cables and things like that. Sometimes the seat creaks, which most of the time creaking means you just got to tighten stuff. So uh, it's totally safe to go around your whole bike and tighten all the bolts every once in a while. You don't have to do that every time, but once a month, you make sure that you would tighten things. That's super important. Um, and I forgot to say, you should also carry things with you when you're, so like a lot of shops will sell multi-tools. These multi-tools are sometimes really fancy looking, have, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8, up to 10 different tools on one little thing that you can carry with you in your bag. Excuse me. And that'll also take care of in case you're on the road and encounter a creek or something loose, and you can deal with it right away.
And do multi-tools tend to have all of the stuff you mentioned at the beginning, like the Allen keys and the...
Yeah, they vary. They vary in price too. You can get multi-tools as cheap as $10, and then you can get multi-tools, more complicated ones with like the full gamut for 100. So obviously you have to decide what is best for you. If you just want to carry the basic tools, like myself, I carry a whole bunch of tools. So, I don't have a multi-tool. I just decide to carry everything in my bag, and because you never know what is going to happen.
Ed, someone inquired, do you recommend Loctite? And if so, where? Are you
Ah,
familiar with this product?
yes. Loctite is something we use for bolts. Uh, Key bolts to use Loctite. You can use Loctite for every single bolt, really. Some of them aren't necessary, especially bolts that you need to loosen and tighten. So like things like the cable fastener cinch bolts on derailleurs, you don't need to Loctite those because chances are you'll probably need to get to them and loosen them. So Loctite is good for bolts that rarely ever have to loosen. And especially if you have the bike for years or you're not intending to change parts on it, it's perfectly okay to Loctite. So things like the chainring bolts, if you have chainring bolts, those are Loctited. Bolts on the brake posts, so these fasten the brake arms onto your frame. Those can be Loctited. Uh, Derailer bolts where it doesn't move, perfectly okay. Things you don't want to Loctite are like wheels and the seat and stuff like that, where chances are you're just gonna break the seal anyway. So for those of you who don't know what Loctite is, it's actually a liquid, and you just drip it on the threads of a screw. They come in different strengths. It's kind of like a glue, but it comes in different colors, like blue, red, whatever. And what it does is when it dries, it becomes like a sealant, or it seals the threads against the other. So it protects the bolt from loosening and vibration. So most of the time, bike shops or people that are avid bike riders will use the blue, which it can be broken if you had to loosen it. Like there are epoxies that are like Loctite, like the red stuff, and it's like welding the bolt to the, and you don't want that because you want to be able to get all your bolts off.
Do you have a preference of color? Someone in the chat asked, you did comment on colors, but is someone in the chat's asking which color of Loctite?
Yeah, we use blue. Blue is the medium strength, I think. Blue is the standard for all our bolts, so that if we had to loosen them, we could with just a normal tool. You don't have to take a torch to it or anything.
We received a question about advice around how do you clean and maintain a bike if you live in a condo, so smaller spaces.
Oh my goodness. I understand. So if you don't have access to outdoor space, some YouTube videos say, oh, well, you just take your hose and spray your bike. My personal favorite, and I do this even though I live in a house in a backyard. You don't have an outdoor space. You can always inside condo, you can lay down a tarp and you can put your bike on it, whether you have a kickstand or something to lean your bike up against. And on the tarp, I would just have like a bucket or some kind of basin, and I'd fill it with water and dish soap, and I would just use an old dish sponge. So maybe a couple times we have to go to the sink and refill the basin because obviously, let's say this bike was super muddy, I wouldn't want to start washing with all the mud on it. I want to rinse it first with just water, either using the brushes or the sponge, and somehow get all the major pieces of dirt off. And then I would fill it again with dish soap and I would wash it. And then you would do another cycle of rinsing to get the soap off. So that is my favorite way and probably the best way to clean a bike, because then you don't have to worry about water getting into the bearings through by hose and so forth.
Great, thank you, Ed. We received a few questions about tires and tubes. Someone asked, how do I know the size of tube to carry for a flat?
That is an excellent question. So if you remember, I was talking about checking the sidewall of the tire of your recommended inflation. Also written on the sidewall is the tire size. Now, you could probably Google tire sizes and what they mean. This particular one is called 700C by 32. So that's a metric measurement. 700C is really 700 centimeters in circumference. And it's bigger than a 20. It's funny, they use metric for one size tire and then imperial for another. So if you had an older mountain bike or a newer mountain bike with, let's say 26 by, you'll see a 26 and then an X and then, so it's usually circumference of the wheel by the width of the tire. So in this case, it's 700 by 32 C, which means centimeters. And if it was a 26-inch wheel, it would say 26 by 1.95 stuff. So when you actually go to, let's say Canadian Tire, they have a section of all these tubes. You just take the number that's written on your tire and you just look for the tube, the appropriate tube size. And I would not recommend trying to adapt a different size to your wheel because anyone who tries to change that flat will have a nightmare. Just can't fit it on your wheel, whether it's too big or too small. So it's super important that you try to match the tire size written on your sidewall.
There's another question related. How do I select the right riding PSI within the range listed on the sidewall? So is there a range?
Yes, that's a really good question. So because the range is designed for And this is what they don't tell you when they sell you a tire or in a YouTube video, is that depending on what use you're using your bike for, and your weight, if you generally go to the higher end of the recommended range, the tires are super hard. So if you want to go fast, and if you want to feel like you're going fast, by all means, pump it up to 85 psi, because not only are you going to feel faster and there's less rolling resistance, you're going to feel every single bump on the road. It's going to feel harsh. If you're a lighter person, it might be too harsh. You go on the lower end of the spectrum, like 40 or something, you're going to have softer tires. It might be a more comfortable ride. It might be more suitable for someone who's lighter, but if you're a larger person who happens to be heavier, it might be too soft. So I would take into account like what you're doing with it. If you're going on rough terrain, gravel, trails, I would err on the lower pressure. If you're just sticking on the road and you're kind of fearful of flats, I would probably go on the upper end of the recommended PSI. Other questions?
Thanks, Ed. That's really great. And then shifting the focus a little bit, we received a few questions about gears. So I'll mention someone specifically asked, how do you clean the gears of a new bike in particular?
How do I clean them?
Yeah.
Is,
Yeah. How do you clean the gears of a new bike or any
so,
bike?
so I'm going to take that question a little differently. How would I know when to clean them? Would that be an
Sure.
appropriate?
Yeah. I guess that's a great starting point, because if you have a new bike, it comes clean and you want to know when.
Well, first of all, every new bike, so every new chain, you don't have to oil. If you just bought a new bike as a new chain, you probably don't. It comes with the factory grease on it, so it's a very heavy lubricant. You actually don't have to clean it for a while. They say that it lasts for about 3 weeks of riding before you even think about lubricating it. You only think about cleaning the gears if you start noticing that there's dirt and grime caught in between each of these cogs. On a new bike, obviously that's not going to happen. And you don't lubricate the cogs when you lubricate the chain. You only lubricate the chain. You don't do it to the cogs. If you do, it'll attract dirt and then you'll have shifting problems. Sometimes things that contribute to dirty cogs is that let's say you lubricate and you don't clean it enough, and then the dirt accumulates, but you've been keeping your chain clean. The pulleys, these little jockey wheels on the derailleur, sometimes they get gummed up dirt. And then so you would have to take the handy dandy screwdriver and you would actually have to scrape that off. Now, I don't have a bike here that has that right now because everyone's cleaning them, but it's also a problem area for accumulation of grime and dirt, much less so than the actual cogs. These pulleys will get dirty before there's a problem with the cogs and the chain rings. So the chain rings are generally dirt free most of the time, unless you totally neglect your bike for years.
On the topic of gears, someone asks, if I'm unable to change the gears on the left hand, how could I fix it?
Right. So you probably have a front derailleur, which this one doesn't have, but there's a gear changer above. And I don't know the details, but it's at least 2 or 3 rings on the front. and you can't move it, I'm assuming, right? Most of the time, gear problems are cable related. So this cable, it's super important to keep this clean. If you were to store your bike outside, or if you haven't dealt with it for a long time, sometimes corrosion can happen in the cable inside the housing. And what happens is that the cable stops moving. So even if you try to twist the shifter, or try to thumb shifter, or however you change your gears, the cable is not moving, it will not move the derailleur. So 90% of the time it's a cable issue. And what we would do is would somehow remove the housing and clean it and lubricate it if you wanted to keep the same cable, because most cables can be revived. And in the worst circumstance where it's completely rusted and won't move, then it needs to be replaced. We have a great Tip Tuesday on our Instagram where we show you in like 2 minutes how to lubricate your cables easily without any tools. You just need lubricant and a rag, and yeah. So I think I answered your question.
That's great. Yeah, be sure to check out Gateway Bike Hub's Instagram for more great content. Um, some great questions here. Someone's asking, do you recommend alternatives to a derailer?
So like an internal hub. I think that's what the person's asking. Yes. I mean, it's not exposed to the elements. We have internal hubs. We've worked with internal hubs. So an internal hub, there are systems where all the gear changes are within this hub. I don't have one here to show you, but it's the same gear changing method, only there's no external derailleur system. And it's super fun to have as a commute on a commuter bike. They are super heavy if that's an issue for you, but they're also almost maintenance free. So they will last for years and years and years. And if there's a problem with it, it's super easy to fix. Um, if you have the money and if you have the capability, for sure, get an internal hub.
And are single speed bikes also a great way to avoid having a derailleur?
Yeah, that seems to be a trend in the city for years, not just this year. Lots of people ride single speed for simplicity because they don't want to deal with the derailleur. They don't want to deal with maintenance. It's so easy to just, clean the chain, not worry about cables and things like that. However, it's not for everyone. So if you're super strong and, it really depends on a lot. See, when you're commuting, it's so much more than just the bike. It's more of the distance you ride, the route you take, all these other factors come into play when you're deciding, okay, so how do I do this? What bike should I use? And if you look on the streets now, everyone's using so many different types of bikes. Some people who ride longer distances use road bikes with gears. Some people use gravel bikes, which are just like heavier duty road bike. Some people like mountain bikes because they are more upright and stable and they take a lot of abuse. And a lot of people use single speeds or fixies, which are a road style bike, but they just have one gear. It's really personal preference. I've seen people use BMX bikes, they're like super big people on super tiny bikes, and it's fine. So yeah, you really have to take into account what would really work for you. If the low maintenance thing appeals to you, then yeah, sure, single speed, and you find the right gear for you.
Yeah, fewer moving parts, I guess.
Yes, yes.
Fewer repairs. So on that note, we've received a few questions about repairs specific to the people asking the questions. I will say in the event we don't have time to um, answer all of these questions because our time is almost up, do go by Gateway Bike Hub. Ed, I know COVID's a bit funny and things are changing, but if I had a bike repair issue, could I go to Gateway Bike Hub and drop in, or should I make an appointment?
Yeah, so we're advising people to just call us for an appointment. We can send you the phone number. Uh, we are answering the calls all the time, and it's usually a drop-off pickup kind of situation, depending on the complexity of the repair. Sometimes, if the repair is super easy, you can come during your appointment time and you can just wait for your bike. And if it's like a flat fix or something that's pretty straightforward, we can help you with that. If it's a more complicated repair and requires part replacement, so all of our services are free, obviously, and we do replace parts, but all of our parts are used. So we usually have used parts. We do have some new parts, but we generally don't replace with new. And we have obscure parts. So if we say we have to replace something, we'll try to find the best suitable thing for your bike. But yeah, call us and help you for your specific repair.
That's so great. And I linked in the question and answer panel, for those of you who had specific questions, I just included Gateway Bike Hub's number, and you can get in touch with them to have a mini consult by phone or make an appointment with them to have your bike repaired for free. That's so amazing that your parts are reused and repurposed. So we're seeing a lot of waste diverted in your space, Ed. That's
Yeah,
just great.
so just for your information, last year we diverted about 10,000 pounds from landfill. So it's been a good project. This is good.
That is incredible. Um, and I'll also recommend everyone visit gatewaybikehub.org for more information on Gateway Bike Hub. And if anyone on this call, Ed, can people volunteer with Gateway Bike Hub? Are you accepting volunteers at this time, or maybe donations in case I have a bike I want to donate?
Yes, absolutely. We accept donations all the time. We take donations from individuals, 1 bike, 10 bikes. If you're a condominium corporation that has a lot of abandoned bikes, we pick up bikes from the city that have been abandoned from. We work with the police. They bring us bikes all the time. Contact us at info@gatewaybikehub.org if you want to donate something, and we can try to make arrangements. In terms of volunteering, funny you should ask, because right now we have a volunteer orientation going on. We have about 4 volunteers at a time. These are new volunteers that we do a new orientation. They can train with us. And part of our repair program is that we train the volunteers to work on the repairs that come in. So it's a great experience to learn about different bikes. You learn different tips and techniques, and we get to share all that knowledge with you. So again, info@gatewaybikehub.org. You just email us that you're interested in volunteering or any kind of inquiry, and we'll direct you the right way.
Thanks, Ed. That's so wonderful.
Yeah.
So for anyone looking for a volunteer opportunity or to make donations, do get in touch with Gateway. So we're just out of time here. So this concludes our lunch hour workshop. On behalf of the City of Toronto, I'd like to thank Ed Mark and all of Gateway Bike Hub, as well as my colleagues, Jessica Chow and Adam Tesfaye, for putting this all together for us today. I'd like to thank all of you for tuning in and your amazing questions in the chat. Happy cycling and have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Ed.